Ava stood in the quiet waiting room, her fingers nervously tapping on the armrest of the chair. Her head ached, and dizziness had become a daily struggle. She tried to breathe through it, but the anxiety gnawed at her. The hospital was busy, and she had heard all the rumors about Dr. Stevens. She had always been known for her sharp tongue, an arrogance that ran deep. Word on the street was that patients dreaded her more than the illness they came in for. When her name was finally called, Ava stood up, her knees slightly trembling. She followed the nurse down a sterile hallway to an examination room. As she waited for Dr. Stevens, Ava's thoughts raced. She had seen the doctor's name on every hospital bulletin, heard the whispers about her cutting remarks, and her inability to tolerate complaining patients. The door swung open, and Dr. Stevens entered, her eyes barely glancing at Ava before looking at her clipboard. "Well, what's the problem?" Dr. Stevens asked, not even bothering to make eye contact. Ava hesitated for a moment, then spoke in a quiet voice. "I've been having headaches for weeks now, and I've been feeling dizzy a lot." Dr. Stevens sighed, her expression distant as she scribbled something on the clipboard. "Headaches and dizziness? How typical. I don't have time for simple complaints. Let's get this over with." The coldness in her tone sent a chill down Ava's spine, her heart sinking further into the pit of her stomach. Dr. Stevens didn't even glance up as she tossed her clipboard onto the counter, her fingers already typing away on the computer. "So, headaches and dizziness. Tell me more," she said in a flat tone, her voice cold and detached. Ava's hands fidgeted in her lap. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her nerves. "It's been going on for about 3 weeks now," she began, her voice wavering slightly. "The headaches are constant, and the dizziness is getting worse. It feels like I'm going to pass out sometimes." Dr. Stevens barely looked at her, typing away with quick, impatient movements. She muttered, clearly not interested. "Sounds like you're just stressed. Maybe you're overthinking it." Ava's chest tightened. "I don't think it's just stress. I've tried resting, but it's not helping. I've been feeling lightheaded and décolle." "Lightheaded? Are you sure?" Dr. Stevens cut her off, raising an eyebrow. "I'm sure you're just imagining things. People like you always think something's wrong when nothing is." The dismissiveness in her voice made Ava flinch. She wanted to speak up, to tell Dr. Stevens how real this felt, but the words stuck in her throat. Instead, she nodded, trying to swallow her frustration. "You're probably dehydrated, or just need more sleep." Dr. Stevens continued, her tone growing sharper. "I'll have you run some tests, but honestly, I don't see anything serious." Ava opened her mouth, but Dr. Stevens raised a hand, silencing her. "Let's get some blood work done, and we'll see." "But really, this seems like something simple. Don't overthink it." Ava felt smaller with every word. The more she tried to explain herself, the more Dr. Stevens belittled her, as if she were a nuisance. The doctor's coldness made her feel invisible, insignificant. By the time Dr. Stevens stood up to leave, Ava's face burned with humiliation, the sting of her words lingering in the air. "Don't worry, I'm sure it's nothing," Dr. Stevens said, her voice growing even more dismissive. "We'll see the results, but don't get your hopes up." Ava blinked back the tears that threatened to spill. Ava's legs felt heavy as she stepped out of the examination room, her heart still racing from the encounter. She kept her head down, trying to keep the tears from welling up in her eyes. The fluorescent lights above seemed to flicker in time with the rush of emotion building inside her. She'd never felt so small, so invisible. Dr. Stevens' dismissive words echoed in her mind, each one sharper than the last. As she walked down the sterile corridor, the sound of her footsteps felt deafening. She wasn't sure if the dizziness she felt was from the doctor's harsh treatment or the lingering effects of the headaches, but it didn't matter. The humiliation burned in her chest. She had come to the hospital for help, for understanding, and instead, she'd been treated like an inconvenience. Ava's thoughts raced. Maybe I'm just overreacting, but deep down, she knew something wasn't right. She had been honest, vulnerable, and yet the doctor had only dismissed her, belittled her. Was she being dramatic? She tried to convince herself that maybe she was just too sensitive, but it was hard to ignore how hurt she felt. The more she thought about it, the more she questioned herself, her body, and her right to be heard. Her hands trembled as she clutched the strap of her purse, trying to steady herself. She couldn't hold it together much longer. Every step she took made her feel even smaller. She had wanted help. Instead, she felt utterly alone. The morning after her appointment, Ava walked into the hospital, still shaken by the encounter with Dr. Stevens. She had been doing her best to push the humiliation to the back of her mind, focusing on the tasks she had to complete. But every time she walked through the hallways, the memories of Dr. Stevens' dismissive attitude crept back into her thoughts. She had been brushed aside, as if her concerns were nothing more than a minor inconvenience. As Ava passed by the nurse's station, a sudden hush fell over the crowd of staff. She could hear murmurs, a few hushed whispers. Before she could figure out what was happening, the hospital's intercom crackled to life, and a voice filled the air. "Attention, everyone. We have an important announcement to make," the voice of the hospital administrator said. Ava stopped in her tracks, her heart fluttering in confusion. She couldn't help but feel a wave of curiosity flood over her. She turned toward the conference room, where staff members were gathering. Inside, the atmosphere was thick with anticipation. The administrator stood at the front, flanked by a few higher-ups from the board. "Today, we are pleased to announce the new director of the hospital," the administrator continued. "Please welcome Miss Ava Hayes." Ava froze. She hadn't expected this. The room went silent as everyone turned to look at her. For a moment, it felt as though the world had stopped spinning. She hesitated, unsure of how to react. But then, with a deep breath, she walked forward, her pulse quickening. The staff seemed stunned, their expressions a mix of surprise and awe. But the most shocking reaction came from Dr. Stevens, who had been standing near the back of the room, her face drained of color, her eyes wide with shock. Ava could feel the weight of Dr. Stevens' gaze, and in that instant, a wave of realization washed over her. The cold, arrogant doctor, who had humiliated her just the day before now, stood before the woman she had disrespected, the woman in charge. Dr. Stevens stammered, her confidence slipping as she tried to mask the sudden shift in her demeanor. Ava could see the regret in her eyes, the realization of what she had done. The once invincible doctor, who had spoken down to Ava as if she were beneath her, now looked small and vulnerable. As the announcement continued, Ava stood tall, her composure solidifying. The staff, who had been unaware of her background, now looked at her with newfound respect, a sense of awe in their eyes. Whispers spread through the crowd, their tone shifting from surprise to admiration. Dr. Stevens, on the other hand, stood frozen in place. Her arrogance had crumbled, replaced by a deep regret she could no longer hide. The doctor's pride had been shattered, and she now realized with painful clarity that the woman she had humiliated the day before was now her superior. The shift in power was palpable, and Dr. Stevens could do nothing but stand there, embarrassed and uncertain about what her future held. Dr. Stevens stood in the corner of the conference room, her mind spinning. The announcement had hit her like a ton of bricks, each word a hammer to her already fragile sense of control. Ava, the woman she had dismissed with such arrogance and condescension, was now the one in charge. Her new position as the hospital director meant she had the power to shape policies, to make life-altering decisions, and Dr. Stevens realized with a sinking heart, she could decide Dr. Stevens' fate. The room felt suffocating, the walls closing in as Dr. Stevens tried to regain her composure. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the collar of her coat, a futile attempt to hide the mounting panic. How could I have been so stupid, she thought, her mind racing back to the previous day. Flashbacks flooded her mind, each moment with Ava now feeling like a cruel reminder of how terribly she had treated her. She remembered how dismissive she'd been, barely listening to Ava's concerns, cutting her off when she tried to explain the symptoms that had been tormenting her. The memory of her sharp, biting words echoed in her ears. "Sounds like you're just stressed," she had said. "People like you always think something's wrong, when nothing is." The regret gnawed at her insides. What had I done? Dr. Stevens asked herself, the weight of her words suffocating her. She had been so quick to judge, so certain that Ava was just another complaining patient. But now, standing here in the presence of Ava, now the hospital's director, Dr. Stevens could see just how wrong she had been. The guilt grew with every passing second. The way Ava had looked at her, humiliated and small, replayed in Dr. Stevens' mind. She couldn't undo it. The damage was done. The woman who had stood before her, vulnerable and seeking help, was now the one who held the power over her. Fear tightened in Dr. Stevens' chest. What if Ava decided to punish her? What if her career was over before it even had a chance to thrive? The future that had seemed so certain just hours before now felt uncertain, clouded by the weight of her own arrogance. The day after the announcement, Ava found herself standing at the head of a conference table, surrounded by the hospital's senior staff. She was still adjusting to the weight of her new role, the responsibilities, the expectations, but there was a sense of calm determination in her heart. She knew she couldn't undo the past, but she could shape the future. The meeting had ended, and the room began to clear. Ava noticed Dr. Stevens lingering by the door, her posture stiff, and her face etched with unease. Ava's gaze met hers, and for a brief moment, there was an unspoken acknowledgement, an understanding of the tension between them. Ava's stomach churned, but she stood tall. This was her opportunity to make things right, to set the tone for what kind of leader she would be. With a steady breath, Ava walked over to Dr. Stevens. "Can I speak with you for a moment?" she asked, her voice calm but firm. Dr. Stevens nodded, her face flushed with a mixture of guilt and fear. They moved into a quieter part of the hospital, away from prying eyes and ears. Ava paused for a moment before speaking. "I wanted to address what happened yesterday," she began, her voice steady but carrying an underlying strength. "When I came to you as a patient, I didn't expect to be treated like that. I came to you seeking help, and instead, I was dismissed, belittled. I was humiliated." Dr. Stevens' face softened, her eyes filled with regret. "Ava, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I didn't know who you were, and I let my frustration get the best of me. It was unprofessional, and I've been thinking about it non-stop since. I promise, I'll do better." Ava's expression remained serious, but her tone wasn't vengeful. "I'm glad to hear you admit it," she said, "but it's not just about me, it's about everyone here, patient, staff, everyone. We have to work in an environment where respect is given freely, regardless of who someone is or their position." She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in, "especially those in power. We are held to a higher standard." Dr. Stevens swallowed, clearly moved by Ava's words. "I understand. I won't make that mistake again. I've let my pride get in the way, but I know I need to change." Ava nodded, her gaze softening just slightly. "I hope so, and I won't tolerate anyone being treated the way I was. Not on my watch." The conversation was heavy, but there was something freeing about it. Ava felt the weight of her past struggles lift slightly, replaced by the confidence that came from standing up for herself, not in anger or revenge, but in a desire for something better. She had found her strength, not in tearing others down, but in setting a new example, one of compassion and leadership. As they parted ways, Ava walked away with a quiet resolve. She wasn't going to seek revenge or hold grudges. Instead, she was going to build a hospital culture rooted in empathy, respect, and care. The change she wanted to see in the world, she was going to start here, with herself. Weeks passed since Ava had assumed her role as the hospital's new director, and with each day, she grew more confident in her position. The timid woman, who had once been humiliated by Dr. Stevens, was now standing tall, fully embracing her responsibility. She moved through the hospital with a quiet authority, her presence commanding respect without needing to demand it. Ava had transformed, not just in her role, but within herself. Dr. Stevens, once proud and dismissive, had become more humble. She worked hard to earn the trust of her colleagues and patients, reflecting on the lessons she had learned from her mistakes. Though the change hadn't come easily, she was determined to be better, knowing that her actions were now being closely watched by those who respected Ava's leadership. The hospital began to shift in tone. Under Ava's guidance, there was a noticeable shift toward a culture of empathy, respect, and understanding. Staff members interacted more compassionately with patients, and the atmosphere felt warmer, more welcoming. Ava had fostered an environment where everyone, patients and employees alike, felt heard and valued. As Ava walked through the hospital corridors one morning, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. She had faced challenges, both external and within herself, and had emerged stronger. No longer the scared patient, she was now a leader, ready to face whatever came next with the strength, wisdom, and courage she had found within herself. The journey was only just beginning. Thank you so much for watching Ava's incredible journey from a timid patient to a strong, compassionate leader. Her story is a reminder that sometimes, the most challenging moments in our lives can push us to grow in ways we never imagined. We hope you found inspiration in her transformation and the power of empathy and respect. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. How do you think Ava handled the situation? Have you ever faced a similar challenge? And if you want to see more inspiring stories like this one, make sure to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a new video. Feel free to share this story with friends and family who could use a little inspiration today. Thanks for being part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video.